everybody, and welcome to So Your Parents Are Old. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. And we have a wonderful writer here, Amanda Uhle, and she has just written a wonderful book called Destroy This House, which is about her parents, her experience growing up with them, which was quite strange, and handling all the things that happened when they got old and very decayed. She's also the publisher of a wonderful outlet, I guess you could say, called McSweeney's, which has been around for a while, which publishes all sorts of sort of experimental fiction and nonfiction, and has been, a fixture on the publishing scene, and is something that is so wonderful, and I hope everybody can check it out. We'll also have a link to it in our show notes, along with a link to Amanda's book. So welcome, Amanda. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about your new podcast.
Thank you. Me as well. I mean, something has to come out of this whole experience of caring for your somewhat decayed parents that is uplifting and something you can share with the world, and also maybe a little sad, and something that other people can empathize with. And that's what your book is as well.
Well, it's so common, what you just talked about, caring for your parents, and it's so hard. It's often so challenging. So I'm glad you're doing this.
Yeah, I think people feel really alone. So it's nice to have a forum where we can share. I mean, so I was somewhat amazed by the level of hoarding that your parents did. I have had, my dad has passed away, my mom is unwell, so I have or had, it's hard to know how to talk about them, but let's just say my parents kept every single scrap of information that you ever might want to access or never want to access again in their home.
Yes.
Can you
I'm familiar.
explain to me what was going on? Yeah, explain to me what happened with your parents.
Well, I think part of what you're talking about, it's partly generational, right? Like there are baby boomers who tend to hang on to stuff. And that feels pretty universal to me. I think what's a little different about my family's story is that as my parents, they were married in 1975 and they've passed away now. My mother died in 2015. So they're gone now. But in those years, I think they were kind of chasing the American dream in a lot of ways. And the way that happened for my mother, it started out with what I think is a very normal amount of accumulating things, being prepared. You can sort of relate to anyone who says, let's have a little extra in the pantry for the snowstorm or the rough, time between paychecks.
Sure.
So you can imagine somebody having, 2 extra jars of the marinara sauce in the pantry. But my mother got to the point where we had 52, like minimum. Like it was dozens and dozens of extra things. And so she did that with food. She did that with non-perishable food, which is, again, you can understand. But then she also did that with perishable food, which got gross and weird. And then my mom...
Did she get extra refrigerators, or how did she do that?
Well, we always had like a freezer in the garage, or, we always had something like that, like an extra space. But then that wasn't enough. And I think like with the hoarding stuff with my mom, it was never enough. There was never enough space. We never had enough of what she wanted to have more of. And so it devolved into what they called the outdoor freezer, which was, just the air conditioning unit, which sat outside our suburban house.
Okay.
Would be stacked with, Thursday's pot roast that we didn't finish, and a Jell-O, and like all kinds of things, and just groceries that didn't fit in, gallon of milk, whatever was outside, or in my mom's car as well. So it was pretty extreme, and it was, it was a weird household as a kid.
And your parents both had good jobs. They were, contributing members of society. What did they do?
What didn't my parents do? They each had all of these different jobs. I think they were kind of these searchers. They were always looking for what they should be doing and what would be lucrative enough that it would sort of sustain this lifestyle that they wanted to live. And so, they started out doing different things. They ended up, my mother was a hospice nurse and my father was a Lutheran pastor at the end of their lives. And I think they finally kind of reached a point where they were in these noble professions. I do think they were both happy in those jobs, eventually, but this is in late middle age when they kind of found these jobs. Before then, my mom was a fashion designer. My mom was actually the first female engineer for IBM. She fixed typewriters in Indianapolis as the only woman doing that. My dad was in sales. My dad sold, peanuts and vending machines. He sold, hotel rooms in Miami. He just did a little of everything, kind of until they found their spot in the world.
And so my dad also was a manager at IBM in the 1960s and early 70s. So he went. IBM paid for him to go get a PhD at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which he did, and then he went into academia and did not go back to IBM. But that was back in the days when companies would do things like that.
Yeah.
I guess the thing is that's so incredible is that now we associate that level of hoarding with poverty, with with an like an irrational mind that can't be put to task, like almost an ADD kind of mind. And instead you had these very voluble parents who yet were doing this thing that was destructive. Right? What was the reasoning behind it?
I sometimes look back at them and I think about how many of their choices were self-destructive. Like that really is a through line in their lives. They did things like, this isn't exactly self-destructive, but it's self-defeating. My dad in 1979 or so, we moved to the New York City area because my dad had a job in New Jersey. And we bought a house on Long Island. So if you know New York geography, that means we were traveling across Manhattan in rush hour and then back again. That's classic my dad, right? Like that's just, that makes no sense at all. But those are the kinds of choices they made. They sort of like followed their impulses all the time. They were id, crazy. And they just never could think of things in a way that or think of decisions in a way that had consequences attached. Like they just kind of weren't those people, which of course, like when people are at the end of their lives and their children are caring for them and you have decades and decades of those kind of choices, it's sticky, as I wrote in the book.
Yeah. So what was your relationship and how did it change before they got old? Like how did you deal with it? That's an open-ended question for you, but yeah.
The relationship evolved over all those decades that we were together. My parents died when I was 35 and 37. So, when you're a little kid, I just felt like this is what parents are like. This is what my household is like, therefore this is what all households are like. You sort of didn't realize that it was odd or different. And to be fair, in the late 70s and early 80s, I think it was not as bad. My parents were more functional. We didn't have quite the level of stuff. They didn't have quite the level of dysfunction happening with the hoarding and just with other stuff, the financial stuff. And then, as things progressed, as a young person, you start to see other people's houses. You start to see how other people's parents behave. And you start to wonder why it's different for you. And so those were harder times for me when I began to kind of examine that and look at how we were living. It was hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
My parents, they were kind of hilarious in the way they dealt with everything. Their method of paying bills, and this started for sure in the 80s. I saw it in the 90s, but, an envelope would arrive. They would kind of hold it up to the sunlight and see if it looked like a check might be inside. And if a check was inside, they'd open it. If not, they'd put it in the garbage. I mean, they didn't want to face what was inside most envelopes that came into the house. And so, they set some aside, they threw some away, and envelopes were opened if they were suspected of having money in them, but otherwise, no. So, they just, it wasn't, I always like to say, in my parents' case, I don't think there was a sophisticated financial con going on. Like it wasn't like they were trying to do something elaborate. They were just avoiding responsibility, basically, and doing what they wanted to do. So.
Yeah, and I guess the question is whether you felt that they also cared about you. Like, what did they feel about you?
Oh, I never doubted. They just loved me, and they loved each other and my brother so much. Like, it was a kind of fierce, intense love inside our house, which, I hope does come through in the book, that these were these flawed people who made every kind of self-defeating choice. But, together, they worked really well together. I sometimes call them the Midwestern Bonnie and Clyde, because they were just like always had each other's backs, always, forever allies to each other. And I think that they love my brother and me very much. I mean, some of their parenting style could be attributed to just the 80s, right? Like the sort of way parents in the 80s assumed their kids would work it out and it'd be fine. And they just they weren't, parenting wasn't a verb at that time. So they just kind of were chill in that way. But some of it was they were pulled and compelled toward their own interests. And my mother's was, for sure, the food hoarding was a big part of it. But then also, my mom studied fashion design early in her career, and she loved sewing and she loved creating outfits and projects. And so the other part of the hoarding in our house was clothes and fabric. My mom had endless amounts. I mean, really hard to describe. At one point, we lived in this massive house that had like a butler's room. It's an entire huge bedroom. And it was full of fabric, like just bags, like Joanne Fabrics, plastic bags, fabric to above our heads, barely a path. So, they were focused on those kinds of things. So they weren't focused on my development and success as a person or my brothers, but they loved us and they did what they could,
And so when did you start having this recurring dream about destroying your house, basically?
That's where the title comes from, is this dream I had. So I was about 8 or 9. Mm-hmm. And I started having this dream in which I would just tear apart my house. I would open up our refrigerator, which was honestly stuffed with everything all the time. Sometimes the refrigerator wouldn't close because it was so full of whatever. I would pull everything out and squirt the ketchup on the floor and dump the eggs in a pile on the kitchen floor. I would take the curtains in the living room and pull them down, throw them out the window. And this was this dream that honestly, it sounds unpleasant. It maybe even sounds kind of violent, but it was so satisfying. It was it was fulfilling this need that I had to just address all the stuff we lived with. It doesn't take much psychology training to see this dream as very obviously me coping with what was going on in the house. So, I just dreamed that all the time. I dreamed 5 or 6 nights a week. This was how it was how I went to sleep. I would think about it. I would dream it. Felt and to me, as I was saying before, when you're a kid, you just think every household is the same. So I just thought people had this dream, that this was just a normal way to go to sleep. But perhaps.
But you eventually realized you go to other people's houses and you realize that they're living in a different way and become very embarrassed to bring anybody to your house. But did you talk to your parents and say, can we stop this? Or you kept it inside?
My parents sort of set this shield up in that what happened in our house was very private and was very much not for other people to know about. So it seemed like out of the question to bring anybody home. I mean, I just didn't. We really, with almost no exceptions, I just didn't bring people into the house. My whole childhood, there were like 4 or 5 times. And then, I just, talking to them about it was so unproductive. If I talked to my father about it, he would say, he would acknowledge it. He would acknowledge the problem, although I don't know that he saw it the way other people could, but he would say, this is how your mother is, and this is who she is, and we love her just the way she is. We just love her the way she is, and that's our job. We just accept what she's like. And my dad probably had his own reasons for saying that, I think, given my mom was kind of looking the other way with all of his financial and other shenanigans, right? And then, talking to my mom about it, was just about as unproductive as you could get. She felt judged. She felt unhappy. She kind of would double down. I mean, the conversations, and as a kid, you think I'm helping, like, oh, I'll help us have less of a mess in the house. Or, even when I was a teenager, I could sort of see ahead to the end of their lives. And I thought, man, I don't know if they're going to change. I don't know who's going to deal with all this stuff. That like years and years of conversations like that culminated in the mid 90s, my mother adopting a nickname for me, which was Martha. Martha Stewart had a big TV show at the time. And, I thought Martha Stewart was pretty cool. Given I'm like a punky teenager, like my hair was dyed maroon. I was wearing Doc Martens every day and this like school protest thing for the dress code. And so I'm like totally that kind of a 1994 teenager. And my mom is calling me Martha Stewart because she thought I was, prim and judgmental about the tidiness and stuff. It was, it wasn't like the nice way of calling someone Martha, I guess. It was kind of the rude way. So
I don't know if anybody wants to be called Martha Stewart, or definitely not anymore. And maybe back then, some people
this
in,
is
in
pre-felony.
Like
this is,
but
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then how do you then handle it when you become an adult? Everything has to be in its place, right? Or it's very disturbing to you.
For the most part. Yeah, for the most part. Although I don't think I'm super uptight about it. And I'm certainly not like really spare about what I have or what I own. I have a lot of things. I have kind of a lot of clothes, and I have a lot of, I like vintage jewelry kind of stuff, so my husband is a record collector. So we have stuff in our house. It definitely hasn't made me, of the Marie Kondo school of just like extremely spare Spartan housekeeping. But I do like things clean, which was not true. The difference between clean and tidy is a big one. Our house growing up was not clean or tidy. But yeah, there's a real difference between like when you can, for me, it's like about whether things are serving you and giving you, adding to your life in some way, which I think I have stuff that adds to my life. But in my parents' case, like they really had so much stuff that just was a burden to them. It didn't, I don't think it gave them any happiness, most of it. It certainly didn't give me any happiness because I was the one who had to clean it out and deal with it later.
Yeah. In my experience, my parents were very anti-establishment, very sort of socialist intellectual style, professor and an artist. And the way they understood keeping so much stuff is if you have it somewhere, then you don't have to buy it from the man. Right? Like the man doesn't get your money for another piece of plastic. Like it's downstairs, it's somewhere, it's in the basement.
Somewhere, yeah.
In truth, yeah. When my dad passed away, my husband, who is an architect and a contractor, was like, there's paint down here, like jugs of paint from pails of paint from like 1980. Like, this isn't good. This is actually like, this stuff is so toxic. Like, why do we have
Bad
all
news.
this? Yeah, or, we had to do something to the electrical in their house. And it was like, the electrician was like, what is going on in here? Because he was very DIY. He'd also been an engineer. So he fixed everything on his own. And then it was all the things that he used to fix things on his own. And, there were a lot of library books that hadn't been returned and things like that, but basically I, cleaned out a lot of that stuff. And it really affected me, as it does everybody, very deeply in terms of the volume of it. Like, my husband said,
Yes.
this is not a garbage can situation. We need a dumpster. Like, we might need several dumpsters right now.
Yes.
And then I would say what is fascinating to me is I don't live very a spare life either, but there is almost nothing that I can do at home that other than cooking a good meal, which I'm not that good at, but if it comes off well without a hitch, I'm very proud of myself, you know? But then clean stuff out and take it to Goodwill or put it on the street. In New York, you just put it on the street, somebody takes it. It is so deeply satisfying to me to throw things away or give them away that I know it must be linked with my parents saving everything.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. Whenever I can fill a, paper bag of clothes my daughter's grown out of or things I just don't need, it's great. Yeah. I'm a donator for sure of things. But I also try not to just acquire things with no real end purpose, which is, I think, what my parents were doing and maybe yours,
And my children are doing. I mean, it's really difficult to have kids who are adolescents now because they're being served so many ads on social media, which of course they don't even know are ads, right? They're like, this lady just wants to share that she has this great face cream that I should get at 11, Yeah. But they don't, they're being served so many things, so they want so many things, so it's then, it's just the getting of the thing. It's just the arrival of the package at the door, the opening, the playing with it for, approximately 23 minutes, and then that's it. It's not interesting anymore. And then it just becomes another thing in your house, right?
Totally.
But you can't explain that to a kid. They don't understand. That's really, in some ways I find it to be, I wonder why it bothers me so much. And I do wonder if it's because my parents saved so much stuff and had so much stuff. If the fact that my kids are constantly wanting these things that then come in and have no purpose, like if that really deeply bothers me more than other people because of where my family did,
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure that's linked. Absolutely. And I think in our culture now, we've just gotten to part of it was COVID, but we've gotten to this thing where ordering something online and like getting a package is this really huge moment. and I'm not surprised. Teenagers love that for sure. But yeah, what I miss is that, before you could just order things like that, people actually got letters and packages from their friends, like little, like personal things. And that thrill is almost gone. And so I think we replaced it with this like consumerism thing of ordering a face cream or a toy. But anyway, I sound old, but
yeah, those things are just, no. I mean, it's a whole different capitalist, landscape now than it used to be.
Right.
And there's a lot more things desired, but it's not like it's really a very fleeting desire. And I don't know. I mean, I for sure feel the way, that you felt in terms of having to clean out your parents' house and realizing that profound realization that all this stuff is really meaningless. It's meaningless
oh my gosh.
stuff. Without the person who imbued it with the meaning, there is no meaning. And that's...
My mother left 2 storage units in a full apartment and then 2 storage units of stuff. And there was nothing more true or profound than what you just said as that the weekend and more that I was cleaning those things out. It was just like, kitchenware and fabric and papers and clothing and just things that, of course, I don't need them. They didn't need them either. But yeah. Do you ever think,
No,
can you
I had a
imagine?
friend of mine. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was
No,
just
go ahead.
saying,
Go ahead.
can you imagine if parents or people of our parents' generation had access to this sort of instant click of the online shopping? I mean, my mother sort of missed that. She could have in her later years, but she didn't. And I just don't know what would have happened. Like it was already so bad with my mom, calling 800 numbers to order from catalogs and going into retail stores, brick and mortar stores. I can't imagine. Your parents weren't ordering online, were they? No.
No, I mean, they probably were a little afraid of giving their credit card information out online because they were so against the man. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think there was a tiny bit of that, but mostly it was a lot of like trips to the hardware store, to like, home goods, to get this like little thing that would just be the right little thing that was needed at that moment and then would be stored for 45 years after that. And
Yeah.
I mean, a friend of mine's mom recently passed, and he sent me a picture of, the random things he was finding in her drawers. And of course, it's like the rings from a shower curtain that she threw away 27 years ago. And I was like, yeah, I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes,
Like there's
yes.
these weird baggies of like, buttons to coats that you gave away like 75 years. I mean, they didn't probably give the coats away, but like that. I mean, when I find buttons, they're to coats I don't wear anymore. Like I realize, like, okay, that coat has been gone for a significant amount of time. But it is just like it makes you want to be like a sadhu in a cave in like, in India. Like it makes you just want to just wear a sackcloth and walk around and say like I'm looking for the meaning of life. And there has to be something in the middle of those two, like the hoarding and extreme buying and the total aesthetic lifestyle.
The total
But
nothingness.
it is,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it is very hard to, just as a human being in the world, it's hard to navigate, what are the things I need? What are the things I don't need? What are the things I should, a library is an awesome thing. Like
It's wonderful.
whenever I'm in a phase of reading a lot, I'm just like, they opened a library around the corner for me. So I just go there and I pick up my book or I order my book or whatever, and it just gets me out of that whole Amazon, or Abe Books or whatever. Like, wait, as you say, like, oh, wow, it came, yay. And now I have yet another book. Okay, I want to keep one out of every 10 books I want to keep because I think of them as my little friends and I want to have them forever and I want to read that book probably again. But not necessary to have all 10 of the books that I've read this year be
It's freeing
collecting
to
dust. Yeah.
Right. When you finish a book, when you finish with something, I think it feels great. Like as you were saying before, to pass it on. I pass my books to friends sometimes. Although I admit I have a lot of books at home. That's my other weakness. But yeah.
Yeah, but there is, like, I mean, we talked now about sort of Gen X and boomers and very young, like Gen Alpha or Z or whatever. But the millennial, I mean, I was under the impression that they were, like, much sparer about what they were collecting because they have this this very designy lifestyle that's sort of sold to them, which is like, this is the espresso maker you need, right? Like, this is the one lamp you need. And everything is so designed and minimalistic and like in like light pink, millennial pink and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know, maybe,
Yeah.
I feel like I haven't been to that many people's houses that are that age. Maybe they do end up with a lot of stuff. I have this sense like they don't really have books and they like, they don't have the magazines, so they don't have like all these things around. But I don't know. It'd be so interesting to know to get the insides of people's houses like that and compare them. As we already have described, the boomers were like notorious for their hoarding. They really were
Right.
notorious.
Right.
And now they're all
They really
dying
did
off,
it best.
and now it's all
Yes.
of our problem. They did it best.
We're all
Of all
cleaning it up now.
generations.
Yes.
We're cleaning it up. There was no war on the soil. They didn't have to move towns because, there was like a rampaging mob. They didn't decide to
No.
leave everything they had and move to Oregon country. They just were where they were, generating stuff. They made enough money to keep buying stuff. They have all the houses. They have all the stuff in all the houses, and
All the
every
furniture,
post-it
all
from
the dishes.
1969.
Yeah. All the buttons, everything. Everything they ever needed.
Yeah, they've got everything. But so tell me about cleaning out their house. You eventually use a service that cleans up like crime scenes. Tell me about that experience.
I did. Yeah, that was exciting. So I actually cleaned out their living spaces a number of times because we always had to move. We were always in money trouble and we always had to move. So this was like, I think 10 moves over the course of their marriage. And I was often doing the legwork on that. But when my mother was dying, it was like the end. She at that point was in an apartment. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't huge, but it was full. I mean, it was so full because she'd had decades of like moving stuff around, and she had 2 storage units as well. So I couldn't do it. Like I'd been through so much at that point and I didn't know. I mean, a lot of this is like decision fatigue, right? You just start like, what do I do with all this stuff? Mm-hmm. So I took several days, probably most of a week, going through that apartment to find anything that I thought we should keep. My mother had also told me, this was like a dark treasure hunt situation. She told me there was about $4,000 in 20s here and there in the apartment. But this was her way of making sure I didn't just throw it all away. And she was right. I did find a couple of bank envelopes with some 20s in it. Not quite that much. But anyway, I had done that. And then I was like, I don't know what else to do with most of it. And I looked around, this was 2015, and I was looking for any kind of cleaning service, but it was so bad. It wasn't like a cleaning service job. And then I found this fellow in Detroit who said he did hoarding, but he mostly did crime scene cleanup, like when there was a bloody scene, he and his people would come in and make it right. There have to be people that do this. Like, what a noble job. When people need that help, they really need it. So I called him and he was great. And I found myself, even talking to this guy, I was like, well, it's pretty messy. Like I was trying to find the words for like, what is it like in my mom's apartment? Because it was really bad. And I don't know if I used the word hoarding. We never did when I was a kid. And even after I was a kid, we never used that word. It was like so pejorative and didn't feel like something my parents would do. So I tried to explain it to him. I showed him a few pictures, but I didn't show him the worst ones because I was scared he wouldn't say yes. And I so desperately needed this help. Anyway, I remember him writing to me. We were texting at that point, and he said, "Are those the worst rooms?" And I was like, okay, you caught me. Like, no, they're not the worst rooms. It does get worse than this. And I showed him those pictures and he was like, okay, well, it's going to cost a little more, but I'll do it. And he came with
no judgment.
Such a gift to have someone say like, okay, yeah, like this is pretty bad, but we'll do it. And he brought some folks and they did a great job. So we donated some of the stuff. I mean, they helped me figure out like what could go to this houseless shelter that I like to support, and then like what was just trash. And they dealt with most of it. So it was great.
So how did you feel not looking through everything to find if there was like an incredible unpublished manuscript or some letter to you with the meaning of life, or like was that like you had written that off? You knew that was not going to be in there.
I did that first pass where I looked in the places where I thought there might be important papers, cash, which again I found some of. But during the course of these people going through my mom's stuff, they found a Bible that my dad had given my mom as a wedding gift. It had their names on it, 1975, their wedding date. And I was like, oh, I should probably keep that. They also found a bunch of morphine, which is another story, but that was worth not just throwing in the regular garbage. And, I have no idea whether they found more things. It was such a volume of stuff and it was such a jumble that it would have been impossible for me to go through it all myself. So I took my chances. I took out maybe 10 bags or boxes of things that felt important or valuable or like I would want to do something with at some point. Most of that stuff is still in my garage at home. And a lot of it I used to write the book, actually. Yeah. I used some of those, I used some of the documents I found and the papers I found to kind of tell their story.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you feel now being on book tour and talking about all this? Has this been really like uplifting or traumatic or both?
I think it's been uplifting, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. The traumatic, the hard part, the challenges, I honestly feel like that stuff is behind me. It's been a while. It's been about 10 years since the story I just told you about cleaning out that apartment. So I don't think, like, if I were in a position of really hurting about how everything went with my parents, I don't think I could have written a book, or I certainly couldn't have written this one, because I think it would be, I don't like a book that's like what I call a complainy book, or like a, sort of a chance to, I don't know, put people down or set the record straight or whatever. I didn't really ever want to do that. I wanted to just sort of tell the story of my parents. I firmly believe in this case, the truth is stranger than fiction, and just like telling the real tale of who these people were and how they lived and what their stuff was like. I thought that that's what I wanted to do. So it's felt good to write the book, but it wasn't like traumatic. And it feels great to talk about it. It's really something I wanted to do for a long time. So I feel happy. And it's interesting. I mentioned before, we never had people in the house, really ever. And so now I've kind of like opened the door. I've invited, North America into the house I grew up in as a kid. So that's a little bit of a switch, and that feels right to me.
Yeah, without shame. And it's a wonderful book. Everybody should pick up a copy. It's called Destroy This House. It's really beautifully written. Even the things you're talking about are strange and difficult to talk about, but it is such a beautifully written book, and something that, is an easy read. You can read it over the course of a week, even a weekend if you're by yourself. So please pick up a copy of Destroy This House, and we, again, will have a link to that in the show notes. So thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on to
Thank you.
So Your Parents Are Old.
Appreciate it. Thank you.